7 movies that will inspire you to do the Corporal Acts of Mercy by Killarney Traynor. Number 1, Feed the Hungry, No Reservations, 2007. When we think about feeding the hungry, the first thing to come to mind is usually food pantries. It's easy to forget that sometimes hunger is closer to home. In this romantic comedy, prickly perfectionist chef Kate, played by Catherine Zeta-Jones, unexpectedly becomes a mother when her sister dies and leaves her daughter Zoe, Abigail Breslin, in her care. At first, Kate is unable to connect with the grieving little girl and can't even figure out how to tempt her to eat, 9-year-olds not being fond of exotic dishes. Enter Kate's new sous chef, Nick, Aaron Eckhart. Nick makes a simple plate of pasta and sauce and restores Zoe's sense of normalcy and hope, beginning a healing process that affects all of them. Sometimes hunger requires more than simply donating canned goods. But keep doing that because, trust me, we need it. Number 2, Give Drink to the Thirsty, Legend of the Lost, 1957. This one is a bit of a stretch, but as the last act of the film finds John Wayne and Sophia Loren desperately digging for water in the desert, I'm going to include it. In this action-adventure, a surly, uncouth Wayne guides an idealistic Christian, Rossana Brazzi, and a reformed woman through the Sahara on a treasure hunt. But what sets this apart is Rossana Brazzi's character, a man characterized by 2 things: his zealous search to save his beloved father's legacy and his Christianity. His zeal for the gospel and his unrelenting faith in the salvageability of the human soul saves Sophia Loren and, eventually, against the odds, converts John Wayne as well. Legend is an interesting blend of action and thought, and the ultimate message of mercy, whether towards the person in front of you or the memory of the person you left behind, is a terrific takeaway. Number 3, Clothe the Naked, 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, 1954. What does a politically incorrect musical from the 1950s have to do with clothing the naked? Didn't they have the motion picture code in those days? Yes, they did. And yes, this movie is actually a great example of clothing the naked. Clothing protects the body against the elements, but it's also about dignity. Enter Millie, Jane Powell, who, having impulsively married the man of her dreams, finds herself outnumbered by his uncivilized, in a 1950s way, relax, unkempt and shoddily dressed brothers. Rather than run for the hills, Millie takes it upon herself to reform and civilize the brothers and introduce them into the society of the neighboring town. And yes, in the process, she gives them all a major makeover, from trimmed beards and hair to eye-catching new duds to go barn-raising in. This movie is more fun than serious, but it's a colorful, toe-tapping example of how one good deed really can change lives for the better. Number 4, Shelter the Homeless, Defiance, 2008. While I was considering Boys Town for this slot, Defiance is a far more action-packed example. Set in modern-day Belarus, sandwiched between Russia and Poland, this movie tells the true life story of the Jewish Bielski brothers who defied their Nazi occupiers during World War II. Living in the woods and constantly moving to avoid capture, they harassed, killed, and obstructed Nazis wherever they could. But what sets them apart from other partisans is elder brother Tuvia's, played by Daniel Craig, insistence that they shelter Jewish refugees, an extremely dangerous act of kindness that nearly tears the brothers apart. The suspense is unrelenting, as the band of refugees, caught between the Nazis on one side and anti-Semite Russians on the other, struggle to survive in the elements with food in constant short supply. Riveting and dark, Defiance more than deserves its R rating for violence, but this ultimately is an uplifting and encouraging story. They may not look or act like your typical saints, but the Bielski brothers saved over 1,200 lives, and that record is hard to beat. Number 5, Visiting the Sick, The Princess Bride, 1987. Hey, who said that acting in Mercy couldn't be fun? If you've been living under a rock and haven't seen The Princess Bride, make room for it on your schedule. Peter Falk plays the grandfather who visits his sickly grandson and helps him pass the time by reading him the epic, and epically hilarious, medieval tale of adventure, courage, and romance. Yes, there is kissing in this movie, but more importantly, it's a story about how illness can also be an opportunity to bond with important people in our lives. Not all of us can be Mother Teresa or Damien of Molokai, but we can all take care of the people right next door. Number 6, Visit the Imprisoned, Amazing Grace, 2006. Starring Ioan Gruffudd and a pre-Sherlock Benedict Cumberbatch, this well-acted, beautifully shot movie follows William Wilberforce's decades-long crusade against the slave trade in Britain and the ragtag group of reformers that support him along the way. It's a well-written reminder that we can all do something to help fight injustice, even if it's only refusing to use sugar. I'll admit this movie is less about visiting the imprisoned than it is about fighting for them, but I think it's a terrific message all the same. If you love historical dramas, political maneuvers, and Christian heroics, definitely give this movie a try. Number 7. Bury the Dead. Dead Man Walking, 1995. Based on a true story, Dead Man Walking follows Sister Helen Prejean, played by Susan Sarandon, as she becomes a spiritual advisor to convicted killer and death row inmate Matthew Poncelet, played by Sean Penn. This searing and unflinching look at the death penalty questions the ethical nature of the penalty, but also explores what violent death leaves behind. I debated whether this is better suited for Visit the Imprisoned, but this movie speaks volumes about burying the dead metaphorically and emotionally so that survivors can heal and move on. Sister Helen is a prime example of how we can be asked to step in and serve during the worst periods of someone's life. This isn't an easy movie to watch, but it's well worth the time invested. Bonus! Number 8. Les Miserables, 1998 or 2012. If you only have time for one movie and you want to maximize your virtues, look no further than Les Mis. Jean Valjean is a man on parole, having just served 20 years for stealing a piece of bread. On his release, he is given shelter, food, and water by a kindly priest, only to repay his kindness by stealing from him. When the priest saves Valjean from being tossed back into prison, Valjean reforms and vows to live an upright life. Throughout the musical, movie, book are numerous examples of corporal works of mercy in action, all woven together by a master storyteller. This epic works is both a musical, 2012 with Hugh Jackman, or in the shorter non-musical version, 1998 with Liam Neeson. Note, purists may take issue with where this one ends, but you'll weep either way.